Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Evidence. This is the channel where justice matters. My name is Marv. I am a true crime fanatic, and I love to dig deeper into the mysteries of unsolved cases. Join me as we search for missing persons, uncover the clues in unsolved murders, follow along with jury trials, and we'll be a voice for the voiceless. I'll share with you the facts, the theories, the clues, the evidence, and the controversies that surround these cases. This is Beyond the Evidence. Hello. Oh my goodness, my camera is not right. Let's see if I can fix it. There we go. Good evening. How is everybody tonight? All right. Well, welcome to Beyond the Evidence. Tonight, we are going to tell the story of Caylee Anthony. I'm sure a lot of you know who Caylee is. There may be some viewers who don't know. This was something that happened in 2008. But her name has been brought back up. And it's important that we keep her name alive. This is one of two cases that we're going to talk about where we probably will not see any justice for beautiful Caylee Anthony. And that's hard to take, not only for a true crime community, but also for the families and direct people involved. So first, I just want to say hi to everybody. Queen of Ocean, Mimi of Six, Andrew Delph, Kursuma, hello from Central Wisconsin. All right. And Jan, welcome. And I'm sure others will be joining us as we go on. So if you don't know, and haven't heard or read the community page, our furnace died. So we have electric heaters going everywhere. So if I have to turn it on, just let me know if it gets too loud. I will turn it down or run it just for a minute or two and then turn it off. So yes, we are here. And I think this first picture here, everybody will remember. Okay. Which screen? Why is... Oh, I know why my screen's not showing up. Okay. There we go. So, Caylee Anthony, and we all remember this picture because this picture was shown throughout the beginning, and then we got to see other pictures. And this story captivated America, just like the O.J. Simpson case did. This is 2-year-old Caylee Anthony, who lived in Orlando, Florida. And her story began on July 15th of 2008. And if you haven't seen these videos, Look them up. They're intense. So on July 15, 2008, you had Cindy, who is Casey's mother, Caylee's grandmother, call police to report that her 2-year-old granddaughter, Caylee, had been missing for over 31 days. And in the audio, she's talking. She calls several times. The police aren't responding like she wants them to. And she keeps calling back, Cindy does, and she finally says to him, "We were notified that my daughter's car was found today, and it smells like there's a damn body in the trunk." That got their attention, especially when she told them that her granddaughter was missing for over 31 days. And if you watch the videos or listen to the audio, Casey gets on there and she's all nonchalant. "Well, I've been trying to find her on my own. I dropped her off at the nanny's, and the nanny isn't there where she was. The whole house is empty. I don't know where she is, and I've been trying to find her on my own." So with the world watching this saga plays out. The police get involved. They look into Casey's phone, her cell phone, her computer, and her vehicle. And they find some weird and odd things. They find internet searches for chloroform and neck breaking. They test her trunk for human decomposition. They do interviews with her, and she tells them that she works at a theme park. She actually takes the police there and is walking through the buildings, acting like she's going to go to her office, and then finally admits that she doesn't work there. It was all so bizarre. Right off the bat. So confusing. Well, the summer of 2008, we get even more bizarre information out of this case. We see all kinds of pictures with her in clubs and bars and dancing and having a great time. And we know that she was staying at her boyfriend's house, and her boyfriend at the time didn't want kids. And even though he liked Caylee, he didn't want a full-time child with him. And eventually, Casey is charged with first-degree murder. And this is all based on the evidence that they had at the time, because Caylee had not been found yet. So then, if you remember, and let me know if you remember this. Let me know if you remember this. Then we get all of, especially if you watched Nancy Grace like I did, then you get all of these videos while she's in jail and she's talking to her mom and her dad, and she's blowing up and getting angry, and she's continuing to lie. She's not telling what actually happened with Caylee. She just keeps making up lie after lie after lie. So as the police are investigating this, they know that the nanny, Zanny the nanny, isn't real. They know she doesn't have a job. She hasn't been working. They know for a fact that Caylee has not been with her for the past month because they've talked to her boyfriend and his friends, and they told them the last time they saw Caylee. And the lies just keep going. This woman didn't have a qualm in the world about lying about her child. She just kept lying and repeating her stories. And when those didn't work out, she made up new stories. Well, in December of 2008, little Caylee is found just miles away from the Anthony home where Casey and Caylee lived with their grandparents. It was by accident that she was found. The weather that summer had been intense. There was flooding. So that area hadn't really been searched very well until the flooding went down. And a meter man had to go to the bathroom and pulled off on the side of the road and found a plastic bag that ended up being the remains of 2-year-old Caylee Anthony. Now, due to YouTube's new community guidelines and standards, I am not allowed to tell you about Caylee and how she was found. So, if you want the details on that, please go look it up. So we're going to get into a little bit of a timeline here. I kind of gave you a backdrop, but I want to actually give you some dates of important factors, and then we'll get into the rest of the story. August 9th, 2005, Caylee Marie Anthony is born. Now, this is the first of Casey's lies because she repeatedly denied to her family members that she was pregnant. And she suggested possible partners, including her current fiance at that time. There was another man that she said died in a car accident. And the identity of Caylee's father has never, ever been revealed. So August 9th, 2005, Caylee's born. Casey and Caylee move in with George and Cindy, and they're living with George and Cindy. Now, the dynamic of this family is very odd. Let me just tell you that. Casey obviously had issues with her mother. And she felt that her mother wanted to be Caylee's mother. Everything was about Caylee. You got to do this, you got to do that type of thing, you know. Her relationship with George, as far as I know at that time, was good. But that changes. June 16th, 2008. Casey decides that she's going to take Caylee and drive off. She doesn't tell her parents where she's going to go. She's at the boyfriend's house at this time. There's an alleged argument, family argument on Father's Day on June 15th. And this is supposedly the reason why Casey leaves with Caylee and doesn't contact her parents. Doesn't contact them at all. Until July 15th, 2008. Cindy is continually calling and texting Casey saying, "Where's Caylee? I want to see her. I want to talk to her." And she's just ignoring her mom. She's fine. She's at the nanny's. So on July 15, 2008, George and Cindy learned that the family car that was driven by Casey had been impounded. George goes and gets the car and is overwhelmed by a smell that remains even after all the trash is removed from the trunk. Now, George used to be a police officer. He knows what this smell is. Cindy also knows what decomposition smells like. So that's not a smell that you're going to forget. Yeah, Casey does have some issues with her dad, but she got along with her dad a lot more than she got along with her mom. This is when, on July 15, 2018, this is when Cindy calls in and says, there's an odor in the vehicle and it smells like there's been a dead body in the car. July 16th, the very next day, Casey is arrested after she leads investigators on a wild goose chase. She goes to the uninhabited apartment of Zanny the nanny, who she says her full name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. And she says that Zanny ran off with Caylee on June 9th. Now, this is July 16th. And she's reporting that the nanny ran off with Caylee on June 9th. We're looking at well over a month. Then she takes them to Universal Studios. That's where it was. Where Casey pretends to have a job. Leads them through the hallways, like I said. And then they take her into like a conference room because they know, the police already know that Casey does not work there. They've already verified it with the company. But the company agreed to let her go in there and pretend she worked there. So after this, she's arrested for child neglect. She continues lying to investigators and interfering with the criminal investigation. July 22nd, 2008, Casey is officially declared a person of interest at a bond hearing. The hearing introduces evidence that a cadaver dog had zeroed in on the odor of human decomposition in the car trunk and the Anthony's backyard. Cindy admits that they all seen Caylee after June 9th. Although Casey is being held on relatively minor charges, the judge is very disturbed and upset with her. And he says there's enough evidence and sets a $500,000 bail. And this is all because of Casey's behavior. You got that right. Andrea says, nope, I'd be calling the day she supposedly took her first red flag. Exactly. You can make more noise than that if you want. You don't have to be super quiet. Move the chair. Sorry, my son's in here. He needs paper.
I don't know how to open the printer.
Why do you need to take printer out of there?
Oh, there is some.
Look down there. There's some paper.
Oh.
He's studying for finals.
I need to make a cheat sheet.
So August 20th, 2008, Casey's bond is posted. Who in their right mind would post bond for this woman? Well, a bounty hunter would. Leonard Padilla announces that he's paid the $500,000 with the hope that Casey will lead them to Caylee. August 30th, 10 days later, the bond is rescinded. The reversal comes a day after Casey's arrest for allegedly stealing and cashing checks from a friend. Yes, what a sweet girl. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. There's an angry crowd that gathers outside the Anthony's home. And it's because of this decision. I gave it my best shot. She didn't want to talk to me. What can I say? Padilla says. Anthony will be again be released after other parties combine to post the bond on September 5th. But that doesn't last long either because she was returned to the jail by the end of the month. Crazy, I tell you. Absolutely crazy. So this bounty hunter, he gets the bright idea. $500,000 is not a little bit of money. It's a huge amount of money to me. And he posts it. And he stays close to her and he's trying to get her to talk and tell what happened to poor Caylee. Hey Shannon, hey True Crime Beat. Pop it in to say hi and we'll watch on replay. This was a big local case for me that I followed so closely, yes. And I know that you did a video on it. True Crime Beat is in the recommended pages on the main YouTube page for Beyond the Evidence. Go check out her channel. Because she did a video on this today. And like she said, she was in the area. So like I said, he gets her out. He's trying to get her to talk. She's just being her normal, lying, narcissistic self. And it does state that another group of individuals does post her bail again. But like it says, that doesn't last long because before the month is up, she's back in jail again. October 14th, 2008. Prosecutors charge Casey with first-degree murder. So they unsealed an indictment that charged her with aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter, and 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. This is when Casey's dream team, as you would call it, is brought together when all this happens. Jose Baez is representing her. That is her main attorney. And he says he sincerely believes that his client's actions will become clearer at trial. I sincerely believe when we have finally spoken, everyone, and I mean everyone, will sit back and say, now I understand. That explains it. Well, if you know this story and you've been following this story all these years, no, we never got that. We never got anything that says, now that makes sense. Absolutely not. October 24th, 2008. Forensic reports from an examination of Casey's car are released. Now, this, at the time, what they did with the car was controversial. It's the first time I had ever heard of any of this. So I can tell you, it's very different from what I've ever heard or seen. So the report notes that a hair strand discovered in the trunk is microscopically similar to those found on Caylee's brush and showed characteristics of apparent decomposition. That part isn't so controversial. The next part is, apparently they took air samples from the trunk, and those air samples were found to contain chemical compounds consistent with human decomposition. I have never heard of air samples being used until this case. It was weird. It was hard to understand. True Crime Beat says Casey doesn't know the truth. Yeah. Camaro Lover says Baez never proved anything he stated in opening statements. True. Carly, welcome. She says, this is the very first case I ever deep dived while it was happening. Well, it wasn't hard to deep dive in this one, Carly, because it was so bizarre. So December 11th, 2008, the remains of our beautiful, beautiful Caylee Anthony were found. And all I can say is that she was found in a bag in a wooded area less than a half mile from George and Cindy's home. And I said a meter man, and it was a utility worker. So I apologize for that. And what comes about this is that this utility worker, whose name was Ray Crunk, he literally had to convince the police to search the area. He wanted them to search that area back in the summer, and they didn't do it. Now, was that because the weather was bad? Like we heard, there was floods, things like that. I'm not sure, but he had already been to that area once, and thought he saw something, and that's why he contacted the police and said, hey, I think you should search this area for this missing child. I saw something that just didn't look right. They never went and searched, as far as we know. So he goes back to this area. He finds the bag, takes a stick. He's poking at the bag, and things fall out. And that is how Caylee is found. So in the news, what we were seeing is those pop-up tents at the site, and they were looking for her and for all of her remains. December 20th, 2008, this is when the remains of Caylee are confirmed. She has been identified that this is Caylee Marie Anthony. Now, one of the programs that I loved watching was Dr. G. She's a medical examiner. She had a show on TV. Here to find out, Dr. G is the one that did Caylee's autopsy. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, I watch that show all the time. And here she's very thorough. She is very empathetic with the families. She does her best to get any and every answer for those families as to what happened to their loved one. So the medical examiner's report said that the bones showed no evidence of trauma and that the manner of death is being ruled homicide. But it was of undetermined means, meaning they know that she didn't die naturally. They don't know she didn't die just from walking out into these woods. Someone placed her there because of the manner she was placed in. But they couldn't tell you exactly what the cause of death was. So in other cases, you've got strangulation, shot, knife wounds, things like that. In this case, even though there's certain things could lead you to one direction, she could not say exactly what happened to poor little Caylee. And the part of the reason for this is because of the decomposition of her poor little body. January 23rd, 2009. So we're jumping from December 20th of 2008 to January 23rd of 2009. George, Casey's father, is taken into custody after he tries to unalive himself. He's reported to be depressed, under the influence of possible medications or even alcohol or both. He's located in a hotel in Daytona Beach, and with him is a 5-page letter. April 13th, 2009. Prosecutors announced that they are going to seek the death penalty. Now, there was some confusion because in newspapers in Florida, they were saying that the death penalty, this case wouldn't be eligible for the death penalty. It couldn't be brought into play, but they did. They charged her, and that was their intent, to pursue the death penalty. So, oh, me too, Carly. You watch Nancy Grace too? Yep. Yes. So then we wait. April 13th, 2009, they announced that. We have to wait over 2 years. The trial commences and starts on May 24th, 2011. And it started off with a bang, let me tell you. The defense claims, or actually, let me back up. The prosecution's opening says that Casey was a party girl and she had no use for her daughter, Caylee. And we know this because of the month she spent shopping, going to bars, partying during her daughter's absence. Um, but the defense comes out and they say all kinds of things. They say Caylee drowned in the family pool. And that George, the grandfather, is the one that covered up the accidental death. And it didn't make any sense to me. This man was part of law enforcement. He knew the ins and outs. He knew that accidents happen and that children do die in swimming pools. It's tragic. It's an accident. But yet he decides to cover it up. It didn't make sense to me as a person who watches crime and researches and reads crime cases. He also says that, now this is Baez, the defense attorney, alleges that George had SA'd Casey. And the reason Casey was the way she was is because of this. She was in the habit of lying to cover up the pain. And he used some colorful language in this that I'm not going to say here, but so he's saying that Caylee died in the swimming pool. George found her, covered it up, and then says the reason that Casey lies the way she does is because she was SA'd and she had to lie growing up because of this abuse, and she just continues to lie to this day. Okay. So that we knew right away what the basis of their defense was. Those two things. Oh, and he said that her habit of lying was to cover up the pain of what happened to Caylee. So George has to take the stand and denies that he ever essayed his daughter or knew anything about Caylee's drowning. That was very hard to watch. He was very emotional. I can still remember it to this day. Just the look on his face of disgust, horror, embarrassment, um, and having to say, absolutely, I did not abuse my daughter, and I did not do anything to cover up my granddaughter's death. I think in parts of that testimony I actually cried because I just felt so bad for him. I never thought that he was involved at all. May 27, 2011, the prosecution brings a witness, and this is Simon Birch, the manager of the towing company that impounded Casey's car in June of 2008. He testifies that he had multiple vehicles that had bodies in them during his 3 decades of being in the business, and that the smell from Casey's car was consistent with those past experiences. Can you imagine having to get on the stand and say, yes, I work for this I own this company, and over the 33 decades, the 30 years that I've been in there, I have experienced, you know, multiple times bodies being in vehicles, and it has a distinct smell to it, and kind of explain what that smell is like, and tell them that Casey's car smelled the same way, knowing now that this 2-year-old little girl is gone, and that she probably was in that truck, in that car, in that trunk. Just awful. So that same day at the trial, the fiance of Casey's brother takes the stand, and she talks about the special bond she's observed between Caylee and her mother. Said that Casey was a very good mother. She was very attentive. Um, and that her and Caylee were very close. Not sure why that was brought on during the prosecution part, but hey, I guess it's a basis. June 6th, a forensic expert takes the stand. I think his name is pronounced Arpad Voss, or Vase. He's from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And he tells the court how shockingly high amounts of chloroform were detected in the trunk, and that chloroform is a chemical released by decomposition, as well as one that can be used to knock somebody unconscious. So every time I had heard of chloroform, I always thought of the movies where the bad person has the rag and he puts the liquid on there and puts it over the face. That's the only thing I had known about chloroform. So this was something new, learning that as the body breaks down, chloroform is also released. So it was interesting to me. So he says that this was detected in the trunk, and this led to his conclusion that a body was present in the trunk. However, another scientist comes on and contradicts what he says the next day. The FBI scientist who compares the chloroform level in the trunk to the amount found in the household cleaners. And there's this big debate. So I'm like, household cleaners? You're going to throw another wrench into this for me? So chloroform can be in the liquid form where you can put it over somebody's mouth. It's found in the body when the body decomposes. And it's also found in household cleaners. My thought was, oh my God, apparently this is very, very low levels of this if this is in my household cleaners, because nobody gets sick cleaning their house, unfortunately. So it's just the back and forth of the two scientists trying to prove their point. But because the two contradicted each other and each made good points, I think the jury canceled out that testimony completely and didn't take it into consideration. Does that make sense with any of you? For those of you that remember this case and the trial, June 8th, 2011. This is where all of the search engine evidence is brought into play. They had a software designer come in and tell the court and the jury that someone had searched for chloroform 84 times and also looked up the term head injuries, ruptured spleen, chest trauma, and internal bleeding. And this was all done from the Anthony's home computer in 2008. And it was done during the regular work hours when George and Cindy were not in the home. The designer later reports an error in his detecting software and determines that the user visited a site related to chloroform only once. So imagine, you're on the stand, you're telling this jury that somebody went and looked at chloroform 84 times. And then you have to tell them, oh, but there was a glitch in the software and she only actually looked it up once. That's a big difference in my mind. Once versus 84. So it's inconsistencies in the information given in this trial that helped get the result that happened. Then on June 23rd, oh my goodness, then you have Caylee Anthony, who gets on the stand and admits that she was the one that researched for chloroform on her computer. In fact, she said that it was because there was something in the yard and she wanted to make sure that her dog was safe, that she actually looked up chlorophyll, but the search engine took her to chloroform. I remember that because that's not in my notes. I remember that specifically. She also testified that the stain in the trunk that prosecutors stated was caused by Caylee's decomposing body was there when the family purchased the car 8 years earlier. So this woman is all over the place on the stand, but you knew right off the bat what she was doing. She was trying to protect her daughter. She was trying to give information that would eliminate some of this evidence that they found on the prosecution side and take blame for the search, because she believed that her granddaughter, and she still believes to this day, that her granddaughter passed away because of a drowning in a swimming pool. And she did not want her daughter to go to jail for that because it was an accident. So a lot of people, after the trial was over, a lot of people thought that Caylee Anthony should have been charged with perjury. Because at the time, the The prosecution brought out records showing that she was at work at that time, that she wasn't at home, yet she still testified, and she was adamant that she is the one that made that search on the computer home. July 3rd, 2011, the two sides present their closing arguments. Now, the lead prosecutor in the closing argument, his name was Jeff Ashton. He's telling the jury how this young mother was motivated enough to want her freedom. And the only way that she was going to get her freedom and be able to be with this man that she loved was by getting rid of Caylee. And now the easiest thing for Casey to do would have been to give Caylee to the grandparents. But because Casey despised her mother so much, there was no way in hell she was going to let Cindy have that little girl. She would rather do something to her, to unalive her, than to have that happen. No, and you're right, Carly. She wouldn't have cared if Cindy had gotten charged. She would have been happy for it. So the prosecutor, Jeff Ashton, actually said something needs to be sacrificed. That something was either the life she wanted or the life thrust upon her. She chose to sacrifice her child. Now, in the opening, you heard about the alleged essay that George did to Casey. Baez was ordered that he could not talk about this because there was no evidence of it. So this says, while forbidden from revisiting the unsupported essay claims, Baez nevertheless delivers an effective closing argument by pointing out the lack of evidence that could definitively place Caylee's body in the car trunk or tie Casey to her daughter's death. I don't know what exactly happened when it comes to this trial. Because, and Carly, Andrea, Janet, all of you that are in here that have followed this case, I thought there was plenty of evidence that showed that she did it. But the jury didn't feel the same way. They agreed with her defense attorney. July 5th, 2011, Casey is found not guilty of murder. This trial went on for 6 weeks and had over 400 pieces of evidence presented in court. The jury, who was comprised of 7 women and 5 men, took less than 11 hours to reach the verdict of not guilty. It shocked me that it only took that long. And it came back as not guilty. I thought they would come back sooner with a guilty verdict. Andrea says jury got it wrong. Carly says, I agree, Marv. There was more than enough evidence to convict, in my opinion. Baez made it an absolute spectacle. Exactly. And that's why I said in the beginning, what do you do when you're part of a true crime community and you know a victim will never get justice? This is the first case that we're looking at in this situation. The second case that I can think of is Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. And the third case that I can think of, which absolutely breaks my heart, and I hope that justice is done someday, is the Tabitha Shuck Raines case. Mimi of 6 says, I've heard of people being found guilty on less. Exactly. Exactly. And Andrea says, pray that karma does its job. Yeah. So far it hasn't. So July 7th, 2011. Now, Casey was found not guilty of murder, but she was found guilty on the 4 counts of lying to police. So on July 7th, 2011, she receives a 4-year sentence and a $4,000 fine for the 4 counts of lying to police. So basically 1 year for each count. But the prison time is canceled. And the reason for that is she's already spent nearly 3 years behind bars, and she's credited for her good behavior. We know that individuals who are charged and sentenced in these usually do like 75% of their time in most states. Well, she's done already 3 years. And so she is released from jail on July 17th, 2011. Now, let me tell you, for those of us that know this case, we know what happened out in the public. The public went crazy. But if you haven't heard the story or you don't know this story, the amount of people that were outside of that courthouse the day that the sentencing or the judgment came down and when she was found not guilty, Caylee Anthony was known as the hatedest woman in America. Because everyone believed that she was guilty. And that was from listening to the trial day in and day out and listening to the evidence. Everybody was astonished when that not guilty came out. My mouth hit the floor. I could not believe it. And I'm like, how in the world could the jury reach that decision? I just didn't understand it. And the only reason Casey was in jail until the 17th is I'm pretty sure they kept her in there those 10 days for her own protection. But on July 17th, she exits the jail after midnight, passing approximately 100 protesters who showed up to demand justice for Caylee. Her lawyer says, "It's my hope that Caylee Anthony can receive the counseling and treatment she needs to move forward with the rest of her life." Well, I bet you her attorneys didn't know that she was going to probably be with them for the rest of their life. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Carly, Andrea. She moves in with one of the attorneys after she's arrested. She can't go out in public. She is the most hated woman in the world. And they know they can't let her out in public. She knows she can't go out in public. And she's pretty much hidden away. I don't know if it was Baez or one of the older attorneys that she stayed with. I don't remember for sure. Yeah, she was working for them, and they were basically, she was working and they were probably letting her have free rent. So the information that I gave you on the timeline, I used two different sites for this. I used People and I used a website called Biography. Both of the links are in the description below. So what happens after this? Well, she goes on and she lives her life. Last I heard, she was working for the attorney that she was staying with. She wanted to get into a photography business. She wanted to have more children, which thankfully has not happened. And we heard a little bit about her, but it wasn't until I think she did one interview right away shortly after she got out. But for the next 12 years, she pretty much lived a solitary life. And I've got a link here. So she's still in Florida. In 2022, she did the Peacock docuseries. Oh, and let me tell you, more lies came out of this one. More lies. She continued with a story that her father was responsible for Caylee's death. She stated that George is the one that did the unaliving of his granddaughter, and that the reason he unalived her was to cover up the fact that he essayed her. So she just keeps continuing. So in her first on-camera interview with Peacock, it's called Caylee Anthony, Where the Truth Lies docuseries. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. She told us that she was working as a research assistant for Patrick McKenna, the lead investigator of the defense team, during her trial and for the past 10 and a half years. He took her in after the trial and he provided a safe place for her and decided to give her a job. And he said he did this with the approval of his family. And one of the things that he said in this docu-series, oh my gosh, is the fact that his life was chaotic, he wasn't organized, and he saw that Casey was a very organized person. So he figured with her organization skills, she could help him out and he could give her a place to stay. And he felt that she needed to do something with her life. So that's why this arrangement came about. Of all the things, Casey actually worked criminal defense cases to pay forward the work of her defense team. So go figure, she gets acquitted, and what does she do? She works for the defense team. She said that this gentleman was a father figure to her. He allowed her to live in his home rent-free until she figured out what she wanted to do in the future. So according to this entertainment business insider, it's Yahoo Entertainment, she actually lived with him until 2022. Wow. That's a long time. And after that, she finally branched out on her own and lives in South Florida. And it's reported that she has kept in contact with Cindy, her mother, throughout the years, on and off. But she did become estranged from both. Now, George, after the trial, didn't want anything to do with her. He absolutely didn't. He's like, absolutely not. I don't want to talk to her, nothing. And as far as we know, he hasn't. But Cindy had kept in contact with her after the trial. Now, in this next part of the saga, we'll learn what really happened between Cindy and Casey and how the grandparents are still keeping Casey's memory alive by keeping her in the news. We're going to go over that on Friday because it's quite detailed. There was an A&E special last week that came out, and George and Cindy both took lie detector tests. Now, if you don't have A&E and you were not able to watch it like I was, you can see it on my TikTok page. I believe it's broken up into 21 sections, 21 parts. And I am going to drop it here in the chat. Hang on one second. I think I gave you the wrong link. Here we go. I knew that didn't look right. So I am found on TikTok at Beyond the Evidence. And yes, there's 21 parts. And it's under the reposted section. So if you want to see it, you can see it there. Friday, we are going to go into detail on what happened during this lie detector test. That both, now Cindy took one test, George took two. But it wasn't just a lie detector test that happened. There was conversations between the host and the Anthonys. Information was given by both Cindy and George as to what's happened throughout the years, what they each believed happened. You know, their relationship, they've been together all these years, but it is strained, and you can still see that today. How they have survived, I don't know. But on Friday, we're going to go into that because it's going to take us another hour to go through this because some of this is just so crazy. So for tonight, that is all for tonight on Caylee's story. Part 2 will be on Friday. And on that, we will specifically talk about the Anthony's lie detector test and what happened in that show and what information was given, what the questions were asked for each polygraph, what their answers were, and what the results were. Now I can tell you that I trust these results. The gentleman that did the polygraph, you know, he's on the up and up, and he 100% believes in these results. And if you think about it, they're not going to try to do something shady on this because it would have been better if the opposite results came out for A&E and the storytelling and all that. It would have made the story better, you know. And I'm sure that all of you know what the results are. In case somebody doesn't, I'm not going to say anything right now. But I can tell you that there was hundreds and thousands of comments afterwards that said Casey should be forced to do a lie detector test. Now, we all know you can't force someone, and we all know she won't do it willingly. So we're going to go through all of that on Friday. And then I also found a little tidbit of Casey's reaction to this lie detector test from her mother and her father, and we will go over that on Friday. So, thank you for joining me tonight. I know a lot of this, is always about who did it, but on our channel, we want to remember this little girl. This beautiful 2-year-old little girl whose life was taken away. And it's a shame because she had people that loved her and would have taken care of her. But unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards for our beautiful Caylee Marie. And instead, she went to be an angel in heaven and watch over all of us. So, in the beginning, I said, what happens when you don't get justice for someone like this? You still get a back kind of justice in all of this. After all these years, George and Cindy finally decided to do a lie detector test, and the truth comes out of who's lying, who's not lying. And I firmly believe that if Caylee Anthony took a lie detector test, I don't even know if she could. She believes in her lies, so knowing our look, she would pass it. I would hope not, but in the end, Caylee will get justice one way or another. She may not get justice here on earth, but that individual will pay for their sins once they leave this earth. And as I say, justice matters, no matter how you can get it. In one way or another, she will get her justice. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Join me on Friday as we continue this in part 2. And just continue Caylee's legacy and keep her name out there in the public. Don't ever let her be forgotten. Thank you for coming, and thank you for those that watched the replay. I'll see you on Friday. Bye.